They're flying to Jawhar, the small town that has become Somalia's temporary capital, and they're planning to open a new embassy for the African Union. It's a leap of faith in a country that has virtually ceased to exist. Many have tried to restore order in Somalia after 14 years of civil war. Together with SBS radio journalist Issa Farah, who grew up here, I've come to assess the chances of this latest attempt. But as we make our final approach, the omens are not good. One of the delegation is studying a map of the landmines spread throughout the country. And despite being part of an official delegation, Issa and I are passed a note warning that the local warlord will expect a $50 per head payoff for the use of his airstrip. Waiting for us are the Somali officials who are supposed to guide the country back to peace. This is a big moment for them. Their transitional federal government was set up last year after a tortuous 2-year process that brought together dozens of warring clans. But since then, it's been largely ignored by the international community. Today, the Somalis are keen to show off their progress. But as we arrive in Jawhar, the first person who approaches us is a local journalist who's just experienced media management Somali style. Sidi Hassan had been kidnapped at gunpoint by a Mogadishu warlord who was angry about the coverage he was getting. The Transitional Federal Government, or TFG, has set up in this small dusty town because the President himself doesn't feel safe in Mogadishu, just 90 kilometres down the road. Even here, he exerts little authority and is actually the guest of the local warlord. In Somalia, there are no border controls, no national army or police, no banks, and the only laws come out the barrel of a gun.
How are you, Ambassador? Very well, thank you. How are you? It's nice.
The Somali President, Abdullah Yusuf, has invited us to film him welcoming the African Union diplomats. Any recognition of his government here is critical and helps to firm up his shaky grip on power.
The problem is that the international community is not supporting. Yes. After now, later on, I don't know what they will do when they will see this African Unionist flag here. What they will do, I don't know.
I think they'll come. I think they'll come following, sir.
I hope so.
I think so.
I hope so.
I think they'll come following. I think it's maybe too soon. I mean, they have issues. They've always had issues with African countries. But when they see you making a bold step in one direction, they have no choice but to follow.
Abdullah Yusuf was always going to be a controversial choice to lead Somalia back to peace. He was one of the most ambitious warlords during the Civil War, which erupted when dictator Siad Barre was overthrown in 1991.
Here are some forces at work in the area. Please evacuate the area now.
Soon after, UN and American troops intervened, but were forced into a humiliating retreat from the country. Since then, Somalia has been left to decline into anarchy and lawlessness, largely forgotten by the rest of the world. President Yusuf participated in this systematic destruction, and his opponents ask how he can possibly unite the country.
The foundation which is built, the transitional federal government, was wrong, in actual fact. People who were supposed to be behind bars, people who should relinquish in prisons for so many years for the atrocities they have committed, now they are calling themselves the leaders.
Mohammed Yassin ran for election as president against Yusuf and lost. He wasn't a player in the Civil War and believes that picking any of the former warlords as president is a recipe for disaster.
It's impossible. It's impossible. You know, criminals who were fighting, a mafia group who was fighting each other, if you tell them come together and now be friends, get into that room and, you know, if I put it another way, like hijackers from different groups who were fighting for booty and so on, and they hijack the plane. And you bring them together, the warring hijackers, bring into one plane with the passengers of their victims, and now you tell them among themselves, lead who is going to be the captain of the plane.
It's not just the president's political enemies who are pessimistic. Most independent observers believe that the Transitional Federal Government, or TFG, is foundering. What sort of chance do you give the current TFI or TFG, as it's being referred to, what sort of chance do you give that of success?
I couldn't put a percentage on it, but I'd say that it's declining every day.
Matt Bryden is a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group and has been watching Somali politics closely for the last 15 years.
There was a tremendous opportunity last year when the government was formed. It was an imperfect agreement, an imperfect government, but it was probably the best we've had in many years. And there was a great deal of hope throughout Somalia that this time it would work. And unfortunately, since that moment, the government's been unable to get to work.
In Jawhar, there's little evidence of government activity. This is the Federal Education Ministry, serving a population estimated at more than 9 million people. The two-room office was locked and empty when we visited. Many of its buildings are in ruins, but the local school is still functioning. Issa explained to the children here that they are among the lucky ones. After more than a decade of civil war, Somalia also has thousands of orphans, and private charities, many funded from the Middle East, have opened up here to care for them. But one of the most prominent, Al Haramain, was forced to close after the US accused it of having links to terrorism. The closure has deeply angered both Somalis and other foreign donors.
My point was with the United States, if you want to do that, and if it's acceptable, this is a political issue, fine, but can you have alternative? Because those 4,000 or 5,000 young people, they are future terrorists. If you just let them close these charity organizations and let them go on the street. So you have to find alternative. You just don't say that, well, I close them and to hell with it.
The lawlessness of Somalia has attracted an Al-Qaeda presence. Their numbers and the threat they pose are hotly disputed. But the United States has taken advantage of the anarchy here to abduct and sometimes even assassinate those it suspects of terrorism. Dr. Ghanim Al-Najjar is the United Nations independent expert on Somali human rights.
It's a sad situation.
He told journalists in Nairobi that fears about Somalia exporting terrorism seem to outweigh concern over the plight of its people.
So the world is looking at Somalia as a security problem. And if that is the case, then we are not going to go anywhere. And this is the worst part that they are looking at. So Somalia has a security problem. So let's keep it safe to others, and then whatever happens inside is just not our concern.
Somalis also have a great capacity for self-destruction, and Issa and I are taken to see a graphic example on the edge of town. This sugar processing factory was built by the Italians before independence in 1960. It used to employ thousands and was one of the biggest industries in the country. But during the Civil War, all public assets were fair game.
waxaa qaata marka dad ganacsadayaal ahoon wadaniyiin ahayn ayaa marka rartay oo